Oh my goodness. Okay, so before I really go into, the process of the peak, I kind of have to explain to you what led up to the peak. So before the peak was done, or before the idea of the peak came to about, this was right after releasing No Games. No Games was doing well. I was still in the process of making Stig. So Stig wasn't complete yet, but I was already working on it. But up until this point, I still hadn't had the idea or the thought process of making an album, right? As I was making Stig, as I was making as I was making Stig, after, I was thinking about, I was still on the ideal of the EP. I was like, I'm just going to put a couple of songs together and make an EP. Not too long after I released No Games, I ended up leading into probably one of the most difficult times in my life, because I was actually hospitalized, and I was hospitalized for very, very major medical conditions. Long story short, I lost both of my kidneys. I had acute kidney failure in both of my kidneys. So at this point, it wasn't even about music. It was, am I even going to survive this? Of course, growing up as a kid, you hear in my music, I went through a lot, so I felt like I was always battle tested, and I always got through everything. So nothing ever brought fear to me of losing or dying, So even in the process of, when I was in the hospital, it was just a matter of, okay, what do I have to do to get better? What do I have to do to make it through this? I know I'm going to make it through this because I made it through so many other things in my life. Why would this be any different? So as I'm in the hospital, I was in the hospital for a few days. I had, obviously surgery and everything like that. Doctors telling me that I'm going to have to be in dialysis for the foreseeable future, this, that, and the third. So I just really started reflecting on, just my life and everything that was going on. And, at this point in time, I was still working my 9 to 5, and I just remember that was one of the first things I did. I quit my 9 to 5 job, because that was my biggest stressor at the time, especially because, I was trying to balance that in the studio and everything like that. And I was just like, you know what? I'm going to quit this 9 to 5 job. I have enough clients in the studio, everything like that. I could go all in this music thing. And I knew that I could have did it before, but of course I had that fear of losing the stability of that 9 to 5. So I was afraid to leave it. And who knows, maybe if I left it sooner, I would have never been diagnosed. But, everything happens for a reason. Whichever the case, as soon as, I came to, after, going to the hospital and everything like that, in the hospital bed, I called my employer and said, I'm done, and I haven't been back since. I do music full time now, to God be the glory, but as I was, in the hospital bed, and I was thinking to myself, and the doctor's telling me, what's the next step, once I get out of the hospital, because neither one of my kidneys are working. I'm going to have to be on dialysis. And I'm sitting here, I'm 34 years old. I'm about to be on dialysis. This is crazy. I just remember saying to myself, this is about to be quite a journey. And I just kept thinking about that. And by the time I got out of the hospital, I told myself, I know that I was planning on doing an EP, something small, but I might as well just go for the whole thing. I might as well just do an album. Who knows what the future holds at this point? You know what I'm saying? I'm not in the best condition health-wise. If God calls me to heaven, I want to at least say that I released an album. I want to at least say that I did that one thing that I've always wanted to do when it came to music. So I was like, I'm going to make an album. I'm going to make it an album. It is now going to be an album. Now, obviously, the moment I thought about that, that sinking feeling came in, like, oh my gosh, do you know how much work is involved with the album? Do you know how many things that have to do with the album? I mean, you have My Move, you have No Games. That's the only songs that you actually have ready. Yes, you're working on Stig, but you don't really got anything from that point. So you're basically starting from square one and you're about to do a full album. Like, you just got diagnosed. Are you crazy? But I just felt that if not now, it may not be never. So I'm just gonna do this album, you know. So sitting back, that's where the idea of the journey came from. It was just sitting back in that reflection and knowing that this journey was about to get crazy. My life's journey was about to get crazy. So I'm going to make an album, and this album is going to talk about the journey up until this point, up until the point that I am right now, you know what I mean, as far as being diagnosed and everything like that. So leaving the hospital, that was the moment that I actually made the decision to actually go for the album. Just go for the Grand Slam. Let's just make this thing an album, right? Now, as I'm getting acclimated to dialysis and everything like that, I'm like, I got to still make music. I want to still make music. I mean, that's all I got at this point. You know what I'm saying? So why not just go to and make music? So the peak, this particular song is actually the first song that I recorded outside of the hospital once I started doing dialysis, and it presented a completely different challenge for me. For Stig, the challenge was just getting the right beat. This was the first song that I actually physically had difficulties doing the song. You know, typically, you know, when I'm recording music, I'm typically standing up, high energy, I'm jumping around in it, and I just simply couldn't do it. It was so difficult for me to do, but I knew that I had to get it done. I knew that the journey had to be done. Come hell or high water, I wanted to complete this. I wanted this to be off the bucket list as far as, you know, my purpose and everything like that. So once I got acclimated to dialysis and everything like that, my next step from that point was, okay, I'm going to make an album. So we're all in on this. Let's work on this next track, right? So I go to my library and I go back to a beat that I made, you know, in the process of just making beats when I was a producer. And I came across this beat right here that I named Kong. That was the name of the beat at the time. And it was a really dope beat. And in my mind, I was just like, I'm gonna make a song out of this. So that's where the peak came to mind, because it was an interesting moment in my life when it's like, okay, I'm not at my peak anymore, but I'm still trying to reach the final peak. I'm still trying to reach that peak, the goal of releasing an album, the goal of succeeding, the goal of success. I'm still trying to reach that peak, you know. So, you know, going through my beat collections and everything like that, I came across this beat and I felt like it was the perfect beat for what I was trying to do. You know, it was a very southern beat, very boisterous beat, but I knew that this was the beat that I wanted to do it, right? So when it came to the beat, it actually all started with a drum loop, right? Now, all up until this point, every drum that I ever did, you know, I built them from scratch. So this was the first time actually using a drum loop, right? So this was already new territory for me anyway, but I was like, you know what? I'm gonna that's how this beat came about. So the drum loop came first, and this what it the drum loop so the drum loop came first, and this what it was. So once I had that, I was like, okay, that's cool. So I'm going to go straight to the piano, because I'm about to make this the most southern possible track that I could make. So I'm going to have, you know, the piano, and I'm going to just tune this thing out. So the very next thing I did was, of course, the piano, the Steinway again. And I ended up coming up with this part right here. Right. So once I had that going, I was like, okay, that's dope. Now I'm just going to add some more pianos to it to bring it to life even more. Right. So then I ended up creating this little loop right here, which I thought was, you know, at the time I was like, hey, this might actually work. So this is what I ended up coming up with. You know what I mean? And literally during this time, I'm literally telling myself, like, this is the peak. This is sounding like the peak. It sounds epic. It sounds like something difficult that I'm about to achieve. This is the peak. This is the peak. I just remember telling myself that as I was going through this beat, because again, the beat was already made, right? It was just making the beat into an actual song now. So as I'm going through the different parts of the instrument, I'm just like, wow, this is about to be perfect. So then I'm going through the beat and I'm like, oh my goodness, I have guitar here that's just playing right here, which sounds like this, right? That's following the piano, right? And they're playing together, and I'm just like, this is it. So at this point of the beat, all I had was this right here. So right? So that's all that I had. I just had this part right here, and I was like, okay, now I'm gonna add to this, right? Because I like what it sounds, but I'm gonna add to it. So the next thing I decided to add, I'm like, epic, the peak, high, grand. I'm like, I'm gonna add a choir to this. So what I ended up doing was I ended up going back to this, and I ended up getting just these choirs. And I found all of these, choir assembly, female choir, a church choir. And I ended up just adding those to it, which Logic has by default, right? And I just did a combination of them, and it ended up sounding like this. And I was like, this is kind of cool. You know what I mean? Right? And it was just, for some reason, I was just like, man, that's just like, that actually sounds really, really cool. I really, really like that a lot. So then from that point, I was just like, okay, let's hear it all as a whole. So I ended up having this right here. Now, from this point, this is all that I had. And I knew, okay, now it just felt like the right time from this point to actually just start writing it, right? So I get to writing, I'm gonna grind till I fall, till I hit the final P. Now, when you actually think about the lyrics, considering where I was in that point in my, I'm gonna grind till I fall. You know what I'm saying? I was literally about to die. You know what I'm saying? So I'm gonna keep going. I'm gonna keep pushing. I'm gonna keep going towards that peak. I'm gonna grind till I fall or I hit the final peak. You know what I'm saying? I'm gonna hit the final peak. So that's where those lyrics came from. If you want to understand the mindset to where those lyrics came from, it was literally at that point in my life. I'm right out of the hospital, but I'm not about to let this beat me. I'm still gonna go after success. I'm still gonna go after the peak. I'm still gonna go after the place that I feel like I was destined to always be. So that's where this whole thing came about. Now, the beat, obviously the beat, I love the beat, everything about the beat. My favorite part of the beat actually is this part right here, which is something that I added on later once I had the hook down, but it's this specific part right here. It's like it's like this little synth thing that I came up with, and it's this part right here. I just want to play it by itself. This one right here. Right? It just gave like such a epicness to it. And then I added these right here, which is a 70s analog lead, and it made this. And that actually is, to be honest with you, probably my favorite part of the actual beat, because it just captured that part of it, and obviously listening to the song, that but beware of enemies, that's where that part comes in on the beat, and it just was a perfect symmetry between what was written and what the beat was. So when it came down to the actual recording of the song, mind you, like I told you before, this was me coming right off of the hospital. I'm in dialysis at this point. It was so difficult to actually record because I would actually get dizzy as I was recording, right? So what I ended up having to do is I actually ended up having to record a bar at a time, which is why I tell you it was the most difficult song for me to do physically, because I physically didn't have the capability to just stand there and record like how I typically used to record. I literally did not have the energy after every bar. If I stood too long and rapped too long, I would get dizzy, right? And feel like I'm about to pass out. So I was like, okay, we're going to have to do this a bar at a time, right? I know it sounds crazy. You guys are probably thinking, you know, I probably should have been bedridden and just, but there was like literally, there's no telling when I'm going to be out for dialysis. You know, I may be able to get kidney transplant surgery down the line, but this was going to be the way of life moving forward. So I figured if this was going to be the way of life moving forward, I'm going to make lemons out of lemonade, or I'm going to make lemonade out of lemons, you know, whatever the saying goes. So I'm going to have to figure this out. So what I ended up doing was, when it came to recording this, as you can see, this is the hook right here. I had to actually break it. You see how it's broken down into parts? I actually condensed it. It was broken down to even more parts, but each one of these sections I had to do one at a time because it was just too difficult to record it all at once. So I had to do this part by itself. So the grind till I fall, and then I had to do or I hit the final peak, and then I had to do I'm a climb until I reach the top, you best believe. I literally had to do that in 3 parts. I couldn't just do it straight through, you know. Now, of course, I'm healthy enough to do it straight through, but at the time, I wasn't able to do it. So I literally had to do it a piece at a time, because I was like, I'm not gonna not do it. I'm just gonna do it a piece at a time. So that's what I ended up doing. And I always remember that when I hear the peak, you know, and it's crazy because it's like, it's symbolic in a sense, because it's like the song is called The Peak, and I'm talking about reaching the final peak. I'm gonna grind till I fall, or I hit the final peak. And it's like, I'm literally doing whatever it takes to reach the final peak. I'm really doing whatever I can, you know. So it was just something that it just pushed me even more. You know what I'm saying? As crazy as it sounds, the medical condition I had, it didn't stop me. If anything, it fueled me to keep going. But another thing I wanted to show you about, like, just this whole song and why it was so fun to me is, this was the first song that I did on the project that I actually had a layered chorus. And what I mean by that is this particular section right here, right? So we have all of these here. This is the part of the chorus when I'm rapping lower, so to let you hear it. But beware, man, I'm only here when you through the scene like a serpent on a tree. It will cost you everything. So that whole part right there, and matter of fact, I'll just mute my my actual ad-libs, right? So this part, why is it really cool? And this is like something that I really started doing, starting with this one. You know, I did it with songs in the past when I was part of the group, but this was the first time I did as Connect like this. I have a few different layers, and I kind of just wanted to show you how some of these layers so you guys can see. It's more voices than you think. So this is the lead vocal right here. So it's, but beware of enemies, see them creeping through the scene like a serpent on a tree, man, they will cost you everything. Then what I did was I added 2 more to that to kind of, you know, just make it fuller, you know, just give it more life, so it's not just the one. And it ended up sounding like this. But beware of enemies, see them creeping through the scene like a serpent on a tree, man, they will cost you everything. So from that point, I ended up adding, I guess, somewhat of a harmony to it, which is this part these 2 part right here. And it sounds like this. But beware of enemies, see them creeping through the scene like a serpent on a tree, man, they will cost you everything. Right? So I had that part, and I was like, okay, that sounded cool. Now, let me add another layer to it. So then I ended up having this high part, which is these two right here, and these sound like this. But beware of enemies, see them creeping through the scene like a serpent on a tree, man, they will cost you everything. Right? So that's that part. Now, when you put them all together, every last one of them, you end up getting this. But beware of enemies, see them creeping through the scene like a serpent on a tree, man, they will cost you everything. And that's that part of the song, you know, and it's cool because it's like a lot of people, you know, don't really take the time to, you know, sometimes really, really deeply listen to a song, but you'll be surprised how much work is put into some of the smallest parts of the song. And that actually was a very fun part of the song to do because, you know, I like layering things and I like making things sound full, you know what I'm saying, making things sound like a production. So I really enjoyed how that ended up sounding and how that ended up coming together and on the final piece, you know. But, you know, The Peak actually was another song that Chado actually ended up hearing. And he was just like, oh, man, let me get on this one, too. And I was more than happy to have him on the track. And the last feature, Courtesy. Courtesy is a great friend of mine as well, another Christian artist, someone I met online. You know, we actually had a bunch of mutual friends, you know, and actually a friend of mine had told him about me, you know, and kind of, you know, made the contact. And me and Courtesy have been friends ever since. You know, The Peak was the first song that we actually did together. You know, the second song we ended up doing was the I Am Freestyle. That's his song that I feature on. And, you know, he's just a really, really dope artist, you know, and it was a blessing to work with him. And of course, Chado again. And The Peak became The Peak. But yeah, there was a lot that went into The Peak. There's a lot of history when it comes to The Peak. And The Peak is, like I told you guys before, one of the most important tracks on the album, historically speaking, when it comes to the journey. See, I'm a grind till I fall.